My husband told me move with your parents and get divorced. At my father's funeral, my husband Jake gave me an ultimatum to move in with my parents or get divorced. But when I opened my father's last documents, his mother, Martha, turned white with shock. The sound of dirt hitting my father's casket should have been the worst thing I heard that day, but it wasn't. That honor belonged to Jake's whispered ultimatum, delivered between clenched teeth as he gripped my elbow too tight. Either we move in with your parents, or I'm filing for divorce, he said. I'm Willow, and this is how my marriage died on the same day we buried my father. The funeral crowd had thinned to just family by then, though I could hardly call Jake's parents that anymore. Martha stood across the grave, her vulture-like stare boring into me, while Henry, Jake's father, hovered at her shoulder like a shadow. They'd been circling closer all afternoon, probably rehearsing their practice speeches about family duty in doing what's best. You're hurting me, I said, trying to pull away from Jake's grip. He loosened his hold but didn't let go. This isn't a negotiation, Willow. Your dad's retiring next month, they need us. My father's body wasn't even cold. Exactly, Jake retorted, you're emotional. You're not thinking clearly about what's best for everyone. I stared at the fresh dirt, fighting the urge to laugh or scream or both. What's best for everyone or what's best for your mother? I challenged. Don't start with that again, Jake said, his voice carrying that familiar warning tone that usually made me back down. Mom and Dad have given us everything. The least we can do is help them transition into retirement. Samuel, my father's oldest friend, approached slowly from the cemetery path. His presence was like a lifeline, and Jake's grip finally fell away. Martha's eyes narrowed at the interruption. Willow, dear, Samuel said, his weathered face creased with genuine concern, your father would have wanted you to take some time to process things. We're family, Martha cut in, gliding forward. We'll help her process, won't we, Jake? I watched my husband nod, the same way he always did when his mother spoke. After 15 years of marriage, I'd never seen him refuse her anything. The weight of my father's estate papers felt heavy in my purse, papers Jake didn't know about yet, papers that would change everything. I need to go, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I have things to arrange at the house. Our house, Jake corrected. And it's too big for one person. Mom and Dad's place makes more sense. Samuel touched my shoulder. I'll drive you. She's fine, Jake snapped. I'll take my wife home. Actually, I said, I'm not fine, and I'm not going anywhere with you right now. Martha gasped, perfectly timed for maximum dramatic effect. Jake, darling, you see how she's acting? This is exactly why she needs us. I turned away, with Samuel falling into step beside me. Behind us, I could hear Martha's voice rising, I could practically see Jake's face reddening with that specific shade of embarrassment his mother always managed to produce. You can't just walk away from family, Martha called after me, but I could. The truth hit me halfway to Samuel's car. I'd been walking away from myself for 15 years, one small step at a time, letting Jake's family reshape me into their idea of a proper wife, watching my own dreams fade like old photographs. Not anymore. Samuel opened the car door, and I slid inside, my hands shaking as I buckled the seatbelt. Through the windshield, I could see Jake and his parents huddled together, three heads bent in conversation, planning their next move, no doubt. Let them plan, they didn't know about the recordings yet, or the letters, or the truth about what my father had discovered before he died. They had no idea what was coming. Samuel's car pulled up to my father's estate, my estate now, just as the sun was setting. The old Victorian shadow stretched across the lawn like a warning. Jake's Mercedes already sat in the driveway, a sleek reminder that I couldn't avoid what was coming. You don't have to go in alone, Samuel said, his hand still gripping the steering wheel. Actually, I do, I gathered my purse, feeling the weight of the estate papers inside. But thank you for everything. The front door opened before I reached it. Jake stood there, jacket off, sleeves rolled up like he was ready for battle. Behind him, I could hear Martha's voice floating from the kitchen, probably already reorganizing my cabinets. Nice of you to finally join us, Jake said, stepping aside to let me pass. Mom's making dinner in your kitchen, our kitchen, Willow, and she's trying to help. I moved past him, the familiar scent of Martha's signature pot roast hitting me like a slap. She'd cooked the same meal for every major event in our married life, birthdays, anniversaries, the day Jake made partner at his firm. Now here it was again on the day we buried my father. There you are, Martha's voice carried that artificial brightness she reserved for public performances. She stood at my counter wearing an apron I'd never seen before, probably brought from her own house. Henry, look who finally made it home. My father-in-law barely glanced up from his phone, mumbling something that might have been a greeting. I'm not hungry, I said, heading for the stairs. Jake caught my arm. Mom went to all this trouble. Let her go, darling, Martha cut in, her knife clicking against the cutting board. She's grieving, though I do wish she'd consider how her behavior affects us. Behind me, I heard Martha stage whisper, you see what I mean? This is exactly why she needs us here. My father's study door was ajar, I pushed it open, expecting the familiar comfort of his space. Instead, I froze, the room had been ransacked, drawers hung open, papers scattered across the desk, the painting behind his chair, the one he'd always joked contained his secrets, hung crooked on the wall. My hands shook as I straightened it, revealing the wall safe behind, still locked, thank God. Looking for something specific? I spun around, Jake stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. What did you do? He stepped inside, closing the door. I was looking for the will since you ran off with Samuel instead of discussing things like an adult. The will is with the lawyers, you know that. Do I? You've been awfully secretive lately. He moved closer, and I caught a whiff of scotch on his breath, just like my father was at the end. A chill ran through me. What's that supposed to mean? It means, Jake said, his voice dropping, that I know he changed his will 3 weeks ago, right after our last dinner together, right after Martha and I told him about our plans for developing this property. The pieces clicked into place. The tension at that dinner, my father's sudden insistence on updating his estate planning the way Jake and Martha had been hovering ever since watching Dad like hawks. You were planning this before he even died. Planning what? To take care of family? To make something of this oversized monument to your father's ego? Jake ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I once found endearing. Your father was sick, Willow. He wasn't thinking clearly. Footsteps creaked on the stairs followed by Martha's voice. Everything all right up there? Fine, Mom, Jake called back, his eyes never leaving mine. Willow's just having a moment. I moved toward the door, but he blocked my path. We're not done here. Actually, I said, I think we are, on several levels. His laugh was ugly. You really want to do this? Fight me over a house and some land? Because I promise you, Willow, you won't win. I thought of the recordings in my purse, the letters, the truth about what Jake and his family had been planning all along. We'll see about that, I said, pushing past him into the hallway. Martha stood at the top of the stairs, concern painted perfectly across her face. Dinner's ready, dear. Why don't we all sit down and talk about this like family? Family, the word had never sounded more like a threat. The blueprint spread across Samuel's kitchen table might as well have been a death sentence for my father's estate. Architectural drawings showed modern buildings sprawling across the land, cutting through gardens my father had tended for 30 years. The date in the corner, 3 months ago, burned into my vision. Jake had these drawn up before Dad even got sick, I said, my fingers tracing the sharp lines that would destroy everything my father built. Look at his signature here in Martha's company logo. Samuel placed a steaming mug of coffee beside me. There's more. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, I found emails between Jake and various developers, all dated weeks before my father's death. The language was careful, coded, but the intent was clear. They'd been planning to transform the estate into a luxury family compound, complete with separate wings for Jake's parents. They were just waiting for him to die. Not exactly, Samuel said, pulling out another document. They were waiting for him to sign this. The paper trembled in my hands as I read a transfer of power of attorney, drafted but never signed. My father's signature line sat empty at the bottom, a small victory from beyond the grave. My phone buzzed, another message from Jake. I'd left the house last night after refusing to join their family dinner, and he'd been alternating between threats and pleading ever since. You should read this one, Samuel said, holding up a final email. It's from Martha to the developers, dated 2 weeks before your father's death. The words blurred through tears of rage. Once we secure power of attorney, we can proceed regardless of Willow's objections. Jake assures me she'll fall in line or face consequences. A key turned in Samuel's front door. I scrambled to gather the papers, but Samuel held up a hand. I invited someone. Henry stepped into the kitchen, looking smaller somehow without Martha hovering nearby. His eyes fell on the blueprints. So you found them, he said. Did you know? I demanded. The whole time, did you know what they were planning? He sank into a chair, suddenly every bit his 62 years. Martha said it was for the best, that we'd all be together like a real family should be. By destroying your father's home? Your father, Henry's laugh was bitter. Do you know what Martha called him? The obstacle. Every night, planning and plotting while I sat there watching my wife and son turn into people I didn't recognize. My phone buzzed again, Jake's message flashed across the screen. Mom's lawyers are ready. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. They're meeting with contractors today, Henry said, pulling out his own phone. Martha thinks she's won already. She's picking out paint colors for her wing of the house. I stood up so fast my chair toppled backward. They can't. The property isn't even, they don't care, Henry cut in. They never have. It's always been about control. Martha's control. And Jake, he shook his head, Jake never learned to say no to her. Samuel touched my arm. Show him. I pulled out my father's last letter from my purse, the one I'd found in the safe after Jake's failed search. Henry read it slowly, his face growing paler with each line. Your father knew, he whispered. All this time, he knew what they were planning, and he left me everything I need to stop them. I gathered the blueprints and emails. The question is, Henry, whose side are you really on? He stared at his hands for a long moment. When he looked up, something had shifted in his eyes. Martha's at the estate now, he said. She's meeting the contractors at noon. She thinks, he swallowed hard, she thinks she's finally winning. She's not, I said, checking my watch. Because in exactly 45 minutes, I'm going to show her what losing really looks like. Samuel picked up his car keys. I'll drive. Henry stood, straightening his shoulders. I'm coming too. It's time someone stood up to Martha, even if it has to be me. My phone buzzed one final time, Jake's message was just one line, last chance, Willow. Don't do anything you'll regret. But as we headed for Samuel's car, regret was the last thing on my mind. They wanted a war over my father's legacy, fine, I'd give them one they'd never forget. Martha's face turned ashen when we walked into the estate's garden. She stood among a cluster of contractors, architectural plans spread across a portable table, her perfectly manicured finger frozen midpoint on the paper. Jake's expression shifted from confusion to rage as Henry stepped out from behind me. What is he doing here? Martha's voice could have frozen hell. Telling the truth for once, Henry said. The contractors shifted uncomfortably as I approached the table. One of them, older with kind eyes, glanced between the blueprints and my face. Mrs. Davidson, I wasn't aware this was a contested development. It's not contested, Jake cut in, moving to stand beside his mother. My wife is just emotional right now, her father's passing. Her father's murder, you mean? Samuel's quiet words dropped like bombs in the garden. Martha's clipboard clattered to the ground. Jake went still. What did you say? His voice was dangerously low. I pulled out my father's last letter along with the medical reports we'd found hidden in his safe. Dad knew about the development plans. He also knew about the sleeping pills Martha had been slipping into his evening tea. Convenient timing, wasn't it? His sudden decline just when you needed him to sign over power of attorney. That's ridiculous, Martha snapped, but her hands were shaking. Henry, tell them how ridiculous this is. I found the pills in your purse, Martha, Henry's voice cracked. 3 days before he died. I told myself I was imagining things, that you wouldn't, that our son wouldn't. The contractors were already packing up, murmuring apologies and quick exits. The older one paused beside me, pressing his card into my hand. Call us when this is sorted, Mrs. Davidson. Legally sorted. Jake grabbed my arm as I tried to follow them. You're making a mistake. The mistake was thinking you ever loved me more than your mother's approval. I jerked away from him. The police are already reviewing the evidence. They're very interested in Martha's monthly prescriptions for sleeping medication and the timing of your development plans. You wouldn't dare, Martha's perfect facade cracked. After everything we've done for you. Done for me? The laugh that escaped me didn't sound like my own. You mean like systematically isolating me from my friends, criticizing every decision I made, planning to destroy my father's legacy while he was still alive? We were trying to help, Jake insisted, but his eyes darted to the medical reports in my hand. Mom just wanted what was best for everyone. Best for everyone? Henry's voice rose. Our son is facing possible conspiracy charges because you couldn't wait a few more months for a legal inheritance, because you had to control everything, everyone all the time. Martha turned on him, teeth bared. Don't you dare turn on me now. Everything I did for this family. No, I held up my phone, the recording app running. Everything you did for yourself, and now everyone's going to know exactly what kind of person you are. Jake lunged for the phone, but Samuel stepped between us. In the distance, sirens wailed. That'll be Detective Morris, Samuel said quietly. He's very interested in speaking with all of you. Martha's composure shattered completely. Jake, do something. But Jake just stood there, looking lost, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. For the first time, I saw him clearly, not as my husband or Martha's son, but as oops, something broke. Talk to me later.